The knock came softly, almost shy, but it made me stop breathing for a moment. It wasn't her, my daughter, the one who used to bring me flowers, stories, and laughter. Instead, it was a woman I had never met before, wearing a polite smile and holding a clipboard, someone who was sent to live in my home and care for me in my daughter's absence. The room felt suddenly colder, even though the sunlight filtered gently through the faded curtains. I stood there, clutching my shawl around my thin shoulders, the old wood floor creaking beneath my slippers. Her voice was calm, professional, but I heard nothing except the quiet thud of my heart breaking in the silence between us. I remembered the last time my daughter stood here promising she would never let me be forgotten, never let me face the days alone. Now her absence was louder than any words could ever be, and the stranger's presence was a cruel reminder of a promise left unkept. In that moment, I felt as though I was already fading like an old photograph, whose edges curl and colors dim, forgotten, yet still desperately clinging to the hope that she would return. I didn't blame the woman standing before me. She was simply a shadow in the place where my daughter's warmth should have been. Instead, I blamed the quiet distance growing between us, a silence filled with more pain than any argument ever could. I closed my eyes, holding on to the last echo of her voice that once promised me everything, and I made a quiet decision. I would carry this loneliness like an old sweater, worn heavy but familiar, and I would find a way to live beneath it, even if the days ahead were empty of her footsteps. The clock ticked steadily, the sound grounding me to the present, even as my heart sank into the past. I remember the exact way she held my hand that day, the warmth of her fingers, the slight tremble betraying the promise she tried to make firm, her eyes full of hope, and the softness of a daughter who still believed she could fix everything, looked right into mine as she whispered, "Mom, I will take care of you. I promise you won't be alone." That moment felt like the sun breaking through a long winter, a flicker of light warming the cold places in my heart that had been aching for years. Back then, I didn't understand how fragile promises could be, how they could shimmer like glass in the sunlight, but shatter quietly when no one was watching. I held on to those words like a thread, tying me to her, weaving my days with the hope that she would stay close, that her voice would come with every meal, every phone call, every shared smile. But promises are strange things. They can fill a room with light or leave it darker than before. Over time, her visits grew sparse, the phone calls shorter, and the warmth in her eyes faded like an old photograph left too long in the sun. I never shouted or begged. I simply waited, hoping the silence would break, and that the thread between us wouldn't unravel completely. The ache settled deeper, a quiet knowing that love sometimes wears away in the spaces between words, and the hours no one shows up. But even then I blamed myself, wondering if my quietness, my sacrifices, had somehow made me invisible, a fading echo in the life she was building without me. Yet somewhere beneath the sadness, a small seed of quiet clarity began to grow. I was not the one who broke our promise. I was the one who kept it alive, even in the empty spaces. And in that I found a fragile kind of strength to hold onto a soft light in the dimness of waiting. The day she moved me into this apartment was wrapped in a strange kind of stillness, like a church emptied after the last prayer. I didn't choose this place. It was chosen for me, carefully measured and packed away like fragile porcelain labeled, "Not to be disturbed." The walls were pale, unwelcoming, smelling faintly of disinfectant and forgotten memories. I watched from the window as the movers carried my few belongings, each box, a chapter of my life folded away into something smaller, easier to forget. It was as if I had been folded into this room like an old letter, pressed between heavy books meant to be kept safe, but never read again. The familiar creak of the front door closing behind me was louder than any goodbye I'd ever spoken, and the echo lingered like a hollow beat in my chest. I touched the worn armchair, the one I had used for decades in my own home, now replaced by a stiff recliner that didn't know my shape. The kitchen was too small to cook the meals I once loved making, the counters too shiny, reflecting a life that felt foreign to me now. I could almost hear the ghosts of laughter that used to fill the house where my daughter grew up, and in that silence, I understood that I was becoming a visitor in my own story. Yet beneath the ache, a quiet voice whispered that this was not the end, that even in this carefully arranged stillness I could find moments to breathe, to remember who I was before the boxes and the empty rooms. I chose to carry my past like a secret quilt, wrapped tight around my shoulders, warming me against the chill of forgetting, and to walk slowly through this new place with the gentle hope that it could hold more than just my loneliness. I remember that birthday, the one where I sat alone at the small table, a fragile cake waiting with its single flickering candle. The light danced across the faded wallpaper, casting long shadows that stretched like the years between her visits. There were 2 chairs, but only one was pulled out, the other left empty, as if waiting for someone who would never come. I traced the soft edges of the plate with my finger, feeling the weight of absence more keenly than the sweetness of the frosting. It was a quiet betrayal, not marked by harsh words or loud arguments, but by the silence that filled the space where love should have been. I didn't cry that day, not openly, but my heart folded inward like the delicate petals of a dying flower, closing against the cold. In the stillness, I understood that this birthday was not just about the passing of years, but about the slow unraveling of the ties that once bound us. The cake, untouched except for the gentle nudge of my fork, became a symbol of all the celebrations missed, the memories faded, and the promises left unfulfilled. Yet even as the loneliness pressed in, I found a quiet strength in the act of sitting there, bearing the silence with a kind of grace. I lit the candle again, not for her but for myself, a small flame to remind me that even in solitude I was still worthy of light. The day ended softly with the shadows settling gently around me and a quiet decision taking root. I would carry this grief without bitterness, holding space for the love that was lost and the peace I still hoped to find. I still have her teacup, the one with the faint lipstick stain pressed against the rim, a small stubborn trace of her presence in the empty kitchen. I haven't washed it since her last visit, not because it's dirty, but because I hold on to that mark as if it might summon her back to the quiet mornings we used to share. The cup sits on the chipped saucer, fragile and lonely, like me gathering dust beneath the faded curtains that no longer catch her smile. Every time I pass by, I brush my fingers lightly over its edge, tracing the outline of the stain like a secret I don't want to let go of. It's strange how something so small can hold such weight, the residue of her touch, the echo of her laughter now swallowed by the empty rooms. I pretend that the cup means she'll come back, that one day the front door will creak open and she'll walk through, carrying the warmth of the past in her hands. But the silence grows heavier with each passing day, and I find myself speaking to the cup as if it were her whispering stories of the years we shared and the love I still carry in quiet pockets of my heart. It's in these moments, holding on to the fragile remnants of what was, that I realize how deeply the absence has settled in me, not as anger, but as a gentle ache that hums beneath the surface, a reminder that some losses are too soft to scream, yet too deep to forget. The woman she sends to care for me knows my pills by heart, the morning blue one, the afternoon white, the bitter orange that settles in my stomach like a stone. She knows the days I prefer to rest, the meals I like, and even the way I take my tea, though she never asks why I prefer it that way. She listens to the stories I tell her, the ones that drift like loose threads from my memory. But she doesn't hear the spaces between the words, the silent echoes of a daughter who once knew every line on my face. To her I am a patient with a routine, a task to be managed. To my daughter I am a mother whose stories once filled rooms and whose hands shaped a family. It is strange, this gulf between them, a bridge I once thought would never break, now crumbling beneath the weight of years and distance. Sometimes I wonder if my daughter has forgotten the rhythm of my heart, the quiet language we shared when I tucked her in at night, or wiped away her tears. The woman who cares for me is kind, gentle even, but she cannot replace the warmth that once blossomed in my daughter's gaze. And so I sit between two worlds, one of familiarity and obligation, the other of love and loss. In this space I have come to understand that sometimes the people who carry your body through the days are not the ones who carry your soul, and that love, even when it fades, leaves a trace deeper than medicine or routine ever could. I remember the strength I carried for so many years, the quiet power that held our family together through storms, sickness, and endless sacrifice. I was the anchor in every tempest, the steady hand wiping away tears, the voice urging them forward when the road grew dark and uncertain. I gave all I had without counting the cost, my body bending but never breaking beneath the weight of their needs. There were nights I stayed awake, nursing their worries, feeding their dreams, while my own faded quietly in the shadows. I didn't see the toll it took on me then. I thought love was measured by how much you could give without asking for anything in return. But now in this stillness, I feel the echoes of that strength like a worn thread unraveling in my hands. I realize that in giving myself away so completely, I lost sight of the woman beneath the sacrifice, the woman who once dreamed, laughed, and hoped beyond the walls of her family. Yet even as the years have passed and the silence has grown, a gentle clarity has settled within me. My strength was never in the giving alone, but in the quiet courage to keep standing when the world forgot to notice. And though my daughter's footsteps have grown distant, I carry that courage still wrapped around me like the faded sweaters of my youth, warm and comforting in their imperfect embrace. The closet holds ghosts, now, her clothes hanging untouched, their fabric soft and familiar, but gathering dust in the quiet of a home she no longer visits. I remember folding those shirts with care, smoothing out the wrinkles, as if they were pieces of her laughter I could tuck away for safekeeping. Each hanger feels like a silent witness to a time when her world and mine were woven tightly together, a tapestry of shared moments and whispered secrets. Now those clothes hang like empty promises, reminders of a life that has slipped through my fingers like sand. I wear my own garments faded and worn, the fabric thinning over the years, just as my hope thinned with every missed visit, every unanswered call. It's a strange kind of loneliness to live surrounded by traces of someone you love, yet feel the weight of their absence pressing in from all sides. The dust on her favorite scarf settles slowly, undisturbed by hands that once cherished it, and I find myself tracing the contours of memories that seem both near and impossibly far. In this stillness, I understand that what she took with her was more than just clothes. It was the part of me that believed we would always be close. But beneath the ache, a quiet truth begins to bloom even when what we love fades. The love itself leaves an imprint, a delicate pattern woven into the fabric of who we are, never truly lost. The phone rang sharply in the quiet room, its sound cutting through the stillness like a sudden gust of wind. I had fallen the night before, the ache in my bones, a dull throb that made every breath a careful negotiation. When I finally managed to reach for the phone, trembling fingers dialing the number I knew by heart, I hoped her voice would fill the silence that had grown between us. But when she answered, it was not with warmth or concern, but with a quick text later that said simply, "Glad you're okay." No questions about how I fell, no offer to come, no shared worry in her tone, only the barest acknowledgement, as if I were a distant acquaintance instead of the mother who had given her everything. The loneliness that swelled in that moment was like a tide pulling me under a quiet suffocation, more painful than any injury. I held the phone to my chest, feeling the absence more keenly than the bruises on my skin. But as the days passed, I realized that my grief was not just for the fall or the cold response. It was for the slow unraveling of the bond I once believed unbreakable. And yet beneath the hurt, a subtle strength stirred the understanding that my worth was not measured by how often I was remembered, but by the life I had lived and the love I had given even when it went unseen. So I tended to my wounds quietly, wrapping myself in a gentle resolve that no matter the distance, I would hold on to the dignity that no neglect could steal. The nurse who came to check on me one afternoon asked a question that caught me off guard. "Do you feel loved?" She asked it softly, her eyes full of genuine concern, as if searching beyond my weary smile for the truth I tried to hide. The question hung in the air, delicate and unexpected, like a fragile thread pulling at the fabric of my heart. I thought about the years when love was loud and certain, the days when my daughter's arms wrapped around me like a warm blanket, and the nights when her laughter echoed through the house, chasing away the shadows. But now love was quieter sometimes, invisible, folded into the spaces between visits and the absence of calls. I told the nurse that love was a complicated thing, that it could be there even when it felt distant, like a fading song you remembered in your bones. She nodded gently, but I could see the ache in her eyes, as if she carried stories like mine, stories of being forgotten by the ones we held most dear. In that moment, I realized that love, even when it slips away, leaves a mark deeper than words or presence. And while my daughter's love had grown silent, I carried mine still soft, steady, and undiminished beneath the quiet, a beacon flickering in the dimness, waiting for a time when it might be seen again. I watched her wedding through the cold glow of a screen, the flickering images, a bittersweet parade of joy and distance. Her face shone with happiness, framed by delicate lace and soft light, while I sat in my quiet room, the hum of the television, the only sound breaking the stillness. There was no front row for me, no chair pulled close to witness the moment when she promised her future to another. Instead, I was a ghost in the background of pixels and voices, a mother whose place had been quietly erased from the celebration. I thought of the years I had held her close, the countless nights I stayed awake weaving dreams for her, and the sacrifices I had made so she could have this day. But now, the distance between us was a canyon too wide to bridge with a screen or a phone call. I felt the ache settle deep in my chest, not from anger, but from the soft, heavy grief of being forgotten in a moment meant to be shared. Yet even as the tears traced quiet paths down my cheeks, I found a fragile peace in witnessing her happiness, knowing that love sometimes means letting go, even when it leaves the heart hollow. And so I held my breath in the silence that followed, carrying her joy with me, wrapped in the bittersweet warmth of a mother's enduring love. I used to have a name that made her smile, a name whispered in moments of joy and comfort, spoken with affection and pride. But now in this place where days blur into each other like faded photographs, I am called ma'am or patient, 3 or titles that strip away the history and tenderness that once defined me. The nurses and caregivers know me by routines and charts, not by the stories etched in the lines of my face, or the warmth that once filled my hands. I feel myself slipping into the shadows of anonymity, a quiet erasure that no one speaks of, but everyone knows. Yet beneath the weight of these labels, I remember the woman I was, the mother who held her children close, the wife who shared dreams and laughter, the friend who listened with an open heart. That name still lives within me, fragile, but unbroken, a soft flame flickering against the darkness of forgetting. I may be called by numbers now, but my soul holds on to the echoes of my true self, a whisper that refuses to be silenced. And in that quiet resistance, I find a gentle power, the knowledge that who I am cannot be diminished by absence or neglect, and that love once given remains an eternal part of who we are. The grocery list she once made for me used to be filled with small joys, strawberries, in the summer ripe peaches, in the fall sweet treats that reminded us both of better days. I would stand at the market picking the freshest fruit, thinking about how her eyes would light up when she tasted the sweetness. But now the list is bare of those little things. The woman she hires to shop forgets the fruit, or simply never asks. The kitchen is quiet, the shelves lined with the plain and necessary, but missing the colors and flavors that once brought warmth to the table. It's not just about the food, it's about the care, the thought, the small acts of love that show someone is thinking of you. I miss the way she used to surprise me with a basket of fresh berries or a jar of honey from the farmer's market. These forgotten details feel like tiny fractures in the connection we once shared, silent reminders of how the everyday love has faded into routine and distance. Yet even as the sweetness disappears from the shelves, I carry the memory of those moments in the corners of my heart, a quiet treasure that no neglect can take away. In the absence of fruit, I find a bittersweet lesson that sometimes love is measured not in what is given, but in what is remembered. The last time she came to visit, the air between us was heavy with unsaid words and quiet disappointment. We sat together in the living room, the clock ticking loudly in the stillness, filling the spaces where conversation once lived. She spoke little, her eyes avoiding mine, and when I tried to reach across the silence, her answers were brief, like fragments of a conversation, half remembered. Her perfume lingered in the air long after she left, a scent both familiar and foreign, a reminder of the distance that had grown between us. When the door closed behind her, the house felt emptier than before, swallowed by the echo of her footsteps fading down the hall. I stayed seated, wrapped in the quiet feeling, the weight of a goodbye that wasn't said aloud. The silence settled around me like a soft blanket, heavy but comforting in its familiarity. In that moment, I understood that sometimes love doesn't need words to be real. It can live in the spaces between, in the gentle acceptance of what is and what cannot be changed. I let the quiet wash over me, making room for the peace that comes when we stop waiting and start accepting, when the heart finds rest in the stillness left behind. I no longer wait by the window, no longer press my hands against the glass, hoping to catch the sound of her footsteps or the soft rustle of her coat as she enters. The days have grown quieter, not because the silence is new, but because I have learned to live beneath it, wrapped in a gentle acceptance that no longer demands explanation or apology. I let go without telling her, without anger or blame, simply releasing the hold that waiting once had on my heart. In this space, I have found a strange freedom, a soft rebellion against the loneliness that tried to define me. I walk slowly now, carrying the weight of memories, like a well-worn shawl, comforting and familiar. I speak less of the past and more to the stillness within myself, finding strength in the quiet corners where love remains untouched by absence. I do not need her visits to remind me of my worth, nor her words to fill the spaces left empty. I have become my own keeper, a guardian of the dignity that no neglect can steal. And in the gentle rhythm of days unfolding without expectation, I find peace, not the loud kind that demands notice, but the quiet kind that settles deep like a soft breath after a long journey. I didn't need to be loud. I just needed to leave. They forgot me, but I never forgot myself. I gave them silence, and in it, I found peace. The quiet that settles after all the years is not a void, but a gentle space where the heart can rest. It is the slow unfolding of acceptance, like the soft bloom of a late flower pushing through cracked earth. In the stillness, dignity returns not as a proud shout, but as a whispered truth that carries through the corridors of memory. Loneliness, once sharp and cold, softens into a companionable silence, teaching that freedom can come not from others, but from within. Forgiveness not loud or demanding, but a soft release that unbinds the soul and sets it free. In this place I am whole again, quiet, unburdened, and gently reclaimed. I breathe in the peace that has been waiting all along, a deep breath that carries me forward without fear, without bitterness. Only the soft light of a woman who remembers her worth even when the world forgets. And so I sit here wrapped in the calm of my own making, knowing that sometimes the greatest courage is found in the silence we keep for ourselves.